Spare a thought for the 14 inspectors of the International Atomic Energy Agency this evening. At around lunchtime today, they clocked into a contested nuclear power plant in the middle of an active war zone. As fraught days in the office go, this is top drawer. And before they set off this morning, the only telltale signs, a whispered reassurance, a kiss of the blue flag, and the boss's pep talk to his team, to the world.
So wish us luck. We are moving now. Thank you for your interest. It's very important that the world knows what's happening here.
And with that, they were off, once more, into what the world hopes is not the nuclear breach. In order to get to the plant, which is under Russian control, the inspection team had to travel across the front line and drive around 34 miles south of Zaporizhzhia along the Dnipro River to the plant itself. They were held at checkpoints along the way which delayed them, but they're now at the plant. And remember, this is all happening as a Ukrainian counter-offensive continues along the southern front amidst a virtual media blackout imposed by Kyiv. To underline how dangerous the mission is, this recent mobile phone footage shows shelling about 3.5 miles from the reactors at the plant. The location has been verified, the date and time have not. The Russians and Ukrainians blame each other for targeting positions around the site. The Ukrainians say their enemy is using it to launch attacks from. The Russians say its military vehicles are on site to protect it. One thing is certain though, Moscow is weaponizing energy, and this power plant is now one of its big guns. As the day went on, this footage emerged of the inspection team inside the site itself. Note the Russian Z-marked vehicles in the hangar. So, what does the success of this mission look like? According to a former deputy director of the IAEA, if it lasts longer than a day.
First of all, if they spend tomorrow and the day after there, then I think that they are making steps forward, because they don't go there for a coffee. So this tells me that they are working. There will be a written report. So some of this information will be in public fairly soon.
Every indication now is that the team will be able to stay longer at the site, which is good news. The plant is under Russian control, although Ukrainian technical staff are still running it. From a distance, it's near impossible to assess what damage has already been done to the site by shelling. But it's a relatively modern facility, and its containment building is designed to withstand earthquakes, for example. It has 6 reactors. The Ukrainians say only one of them is currently operational. Before the war, it supplied 20% of Ukraine's electricity. The most immediate risk is what would happen if the power supply to the plant was cut off. That could mean that the system which cools the hot reactor core could stop working and the fuel inside could start to melt. One of the other issues the inspection team will be looking out for, possible disruption of vital maintenance equipment supply lines to the site. In the last few hours, some of the inspectors left the plant, and an initial assessment from the mission leader.
I worry, and I will continue to be worried about the plant until we have a situation which is more stable, which is more predictable. It is obvious that the plant and the physical integrity of the plant has been violated.
The ultimate success would be a military exclusion zone round the site, unlikely to happen anytime soon. The short-term win, though, the inspectors coming back tomorrow, which they will.
And another leading Russian businessman has died in mysterious circumstances. Ravel Maganov, chairman of the Russian oil company Lukoil, was found dead in Moscow after apparently falling out of a 6th-floor hospital window. The TASS news agency claimed he had taken his own life. Back in March, the Lukoil board had spoken out against the war in Ukraine, calling for it to end as soon as possible. Sir Lawrence Freedman, the Emeritus Professor of War Studies at King's College, is one of Britain's leading authorities on war. He's just written a substantial new book called Command, The Politics of Military Operations from Korea to Ukraine. I talked to him earlier and began by asking whether the West is going to lose patience and put pressure on Ukraine to come to some kind of settlement.
I'm less bothered about the West putting pressure on the Ukrainians to make concessions, so long as the Ukrainians are making progress and using the weapons that they've got. Well, I mean, the energy crisis obviously is a consequence of this war, but most people, I think, understand that this is Putin's responsibility, indeed Putin's tactic.
It's a weapon of war.
It's a weapon of war. I mean, he's at war with the West, and he's using energy as his main means, like we try to put sanctions on the Russian economy. But I don't think either of those are going to be decisive. I think what the Ukrainians are trying to do is to demonstrate to the Russians that their position is untenable. It's not going to be sort of dramatic columns bashing through Russian lines. There'd be a bit of that, but I think it's much more an awareness on the Russian side that their supply lines are battered, their command system is attenuated. They're going to have problems with supplies of ammunition, food, etc. All of these things undermine the morale.
So if there's no prospect of a deal, you're looking at a lengthy military conflict. Does that mean inevitably that Russia has to go for general mobilization? And what are the consequences of that for Putin?
I think the problem for Putin is that general mobilization would affect the people he's been trying, in a sense, to protect from the effects of the war. It'd also actually be quite difficult now. They don't actually have the people to train tens of thousands of troops because a lot of their best people have been pushed forward into the front. So, the Russians do have a problem of shortage of troops. It's actually quite difficult to rectify it. What is important for Putin is that a lot of the criticism of the war doesn't come from sort of moderate, peaceful types. It comes from ultra-nationalists who are very cross with him for not mobilizing, in a sense, not taking the biggest chance they've got to recreate at least part of the Soviet Union and do it ruthlessly and efficiently.
Can the Ukrainians win, do you think?
Yes. In the end, this is a political decision. I don't think the Ukrainians are going to be able to push the Russians out if the Russians are fighting for every inch of the territory they hold. But nor do I think the Russians would fight for every inch of the territory they hold, because at some point, the Russian military have got to think of the state of the military as an institution. They've lost 5-6 years worth of defense production. I think at some point, they say this isn't working and we have to end.
It could be months or likely years?
I don't think it'll be years. I don't think either side can sustain this for years. Months, certainly.
China features relatively little in your book. We're reporting on the UN findings today. But you note towards the end of your book that China is intent on turning itself into, and I quote, a military power capable of challenging the US in all domains. So in that context, if Liz Truss becomes the next British Prime Minister, as most people expect, would she be right to declare China a national security threat on a par with Russia?
It's a different sort of threat. There is a security threat there. The main issue with China is Taiwan. I mean, this is the obvious area where they've made military threats.
Do you think that a conflict between China and Taiwan is now an inevitability?
I'm not sure. I mean, it's a big deal to try to take over Taiwan. I mean, it's not as big a country as Ukraine, and China's enormous. But it's an amphibious operation. I think what most people would expect would be a blockade rather than an invasion. You sort of said to put Taiwan under siege. And that would be very difficult to deal with because that would almost invite a clash with the US Navy. And if European navies, Britain possibly, France possibly, were going to get involved, that would make more of a case than an outright invasion. So I think there's where some tricky strategic issues lie for the future.
Sir Lawrence Freedman, thanks very much for joining us.